All right, rolling right along. Act Up, we have Luke, Verge, and Sam. We're going to speak to you about Act Up.
So I think this one will go to I think at the very beginning, so we could just splice it together.
I kind of want to get.
Hi, I'm Luke.
That's only what you're doing.
I'm Sam.
And we're from ACT UP, an all-volunteer organization united in anger to end the AIDS pandemic. ACT UP's been around for over 20 years now, and right now we're fighting a campaign to get the city to fund housing for homeless people living with HIV. I want to tell you a bit about a friend of mine named Cliff. Cliff is why I got involved in this campaign. He and his wife were living on the streets before it was a political statement to do so. He and his wife lived in the shelters until he came down with scarlet fever. As you might expect, living in a shelter with a compromised immune system is not a healthy thing to do. They lived on the streets for years. At the same time, his wife was dying of cancer. So Cliff would move from shelter to shelter, from street to street, and try to visit his wife in the hospital as she died slowly. And all this time, he was waiting on the city's waiting list for housing, a waiting list that's now 30 months long and still growing. So finally, housing came through. Unfortunately, it was too late for Cliff's wife. She had already died. But today he lives in a home, and he is an example for all of us. So he talked to me about his story and the campaign that he and ACT UP had started when I first moved here, and I decided to join. And so for years now, we've been asking the city, asking Mayor Nutter and City Council to fund housing for people living with AIDS. Ending the city's waiting list, which is now 220 people long, would cost about $2 million. And the city has said time and time again, we don't have the resources to make this happen. It's just way too much. We can't afford it. We've met with the mayor, we've met with city council, we've gotten statements of support from health professionals and doctors and nurses around the city, and still the answer is the same. But we all know the city has the money. We all know the city has what it takes to end this housing waiting list, and we're going to keep fighting, and we appreciate your support.
Thanks, Luke. The only thing that I have to add is, AIDS is political. The crisis is political. People who are living with HIV tend to be folks that don't have access to resources, whether it's housing or prevention. So ACT UP has been around for 23 years. We're the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. We believe in direct action to force the city to prioritize people who are vulnerable and people who they don't usually listen to. So right now and in general, the city's listening to people who have money, people who have resources. Well, we're here to say that it's the people that don't have resources that need them. So we're having a meeting tomorrow just to strategize and think through different things that we can do to either push the city to put funding into housing, or alternatively, additionally, to take over an abandoned house and say, we know how to do this. Like, if we can demonstrate to the city that we know how to take care of each other and ourselves, then it'll both push them to do what they can, right? Because it's also demonstrated that it costs the city just as much to put people in shelters as it would to house people permanently. So that's unacceptable. But so one of the things we're going to be talking about and strategizing around tomorrow night is taking over and occupying buildings and creating housing for each other and ourselves. So Luke's got some flyers around our meeting tomorrow. Hopefully people can make it out there. It's at 6 o'clock at St. Luke's Church, which is right down there, 13th. And I think that's it. That's it. ACT UP, fight back, fight AIDS.
All right, we have 4 more groups. Now we're going to hear from Stan from Neighborhood Networks. Come on, give it up.
So I wasn't really scheduled or planning to speak today, but when I heard about when I heard about taxes and the problems we've been having in trying to get progressive taxes enacted, I just want to give people hope. We can get progressive taxes enacted. We have gotten progressive taxes enacted in this city. We had a struggle about 10 years ago when the late Councilman David Cohen was still alive. How many people remember him? A great man. And he, in his last year of life, struggled with the help of lots of other people to get a tax reduction in place for working families. Any family of four bringing in $34,000 or less was going to have their wage tax reduced to 1% from the 4% that it was then. And that got passed because he insisted it get passed, just like people out here are insisting that things happen, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. And it got passed over mayor's veto, but he had to have it tweaked a little bit so that it wouldn't go into effect right away. Unfortunately, he passed away, the movement kind of dissipated, and year after year after year, people like Mayor Nutter, when he was in council and after he became mayor, have pushed through legislation, pushing that back and pushing it back and pushing it back. So it's now not supposed to go into effect until 2017. But it's on the books. And it's supposed to reduce the taxes of poor folks to 1%. If this movement makes it a priority, we can make that happen and we don't have to wait till 2017. And there was supposed to be an elimination of the business tax in town. The Chamber of Commerce 10 years ago pushed to have the business tax completely eliminated. That is $400 million of city revenue. And people pushed back against that. And just last week, they gave up on it because the legacy of that movement still lives, and they gave up on it. And they, in fact, instead put in a tax exemption for businesses with gross receipts of less than $100,000, although they did cut the overall revenue from the business tax. So they are still pushing to eliminate or reduce, they're pushing to reduce the business tax, but they don't have the chutzpah, to use an expression that I know about from my previous life. They don't have the chutzpah to completely eliminate it. And we can still make it more progressive. We can make out-of-town businesses like Coors Beer and Ford Motors and General Motors and Apple and all these other companies pay a much greater share of taxes